Story 1. My parents favored my twin sister so much that they blew my wedding fund on her. So I cut them off after rejecting mom's selfish demand. I, 23F, have a twin sister, Allison, who I'm not on good terms with. Scratch that. I'm not even on speaking terms with her, and neither with my parents. We used to be at least on talking terms in spite of the way I've been treated in the past, but for the last 2 years I've kept my distance, and they hadn't bothered to reach out to me either until recently. Allison is 12 minutes older than me and, by default, the golden child because she's older. My parents only wanted one kid because that's what they had planned for, and they didn't have the means to raise two. But by the time they found out, it was too late, and Mom didn't want to risk anything. I found out about this around the time I was in high school, from my drunk uncle at a Thanksgiving party, and that was pretty much the day I stopped trying to win my parents over. They'd done the most natural thing somebody in those circumstances could do. Gave birth to 2 kids and decided that only one of them would be loved. That happened to be Allison and not me right from when we were kids. The sibling rivalry between me and Allison was insane. Everything she could do, I'd try to do better, just to impress our parents, but they just seemed to hate me more for outdoing their golden child. And I'll be honest, Allison really wasn't interested in being better than me. She just wanted people to validate her, so she'd pretend she cared about the competition we had going on. I'll admit that she was good at manipulation and making people believe that she actually felt hurt when I do things better, which led to a lot of people validating her feelings and putting me down to make her feel better. These people included my parents, a couple of our relatives, and even some people from high school. So, to conclude, what I got out of the competition was good grades and lots of co-curricular so I could be better than my sister, and what she got out of this was my parents' and other people's attention, validation, and sympathy because I was clearly the bad guy for making her feel less. Looking back, I don't think I would trade that, but I sure would like to rub it in her face more than I had at the time. Then, 2 years ago, we celebrated our 21st birthday. Both of us had graduated by then. She'd graduated from a regular college, but I'd graduated from one of the top business schools in the state. Not only that, I'd also been the valedictorian and had also been on a scholarship, which meant that my parents had saved quite a lot on my education. And I called me crazy, but I actually expected my parents to be happy about it. They weren't, and only paid attention to Allison and her future because she had barely scraped by. Both of us had moved back home, but while I was working from home at a firm as an intern already, Allison was still looking for jobs and getting rejected left and right. My parents cared more about that and hadn't even bothered to congratulate me or anything. I couldn't say I was surprised, but I sure was disappointed. I tried to hide it because, at the time, I was still living with my parents and hadn't saved up enough to move out yet. So I decided I'd just keep my mouth shut about my feelings. But after our 21st birthday, I just couldn't anymore. I expected them to do something big for us, but the day before our birthday, I discovered that everyone had left me home alone, and all that they'd left for me was a note that said they were heading to the beach with Allison and her friends and would be back after a couple of days. I still remember being absolutely shattered when I read that note because they'd taken Allison and her friends on a beach trip while all I got was a happy birthday note and a $50 gift card. A lot of things had been unfair about my childhood, but that was where I drew the line. It was just so hugely disappointing and heartless of them that I decided to move out that day and never look back. I had a couple of friends who were willing to let me stay with them until I found a place of my own and could afford it, which wouldn't take long because the firm I was interning at was probably going to hire me after the internship was over, so I just needed a place to live for 2 months at most. I packed my stuff and moved in with a friend of mine without telling my parents or sister and haven't looked back even once. Neither did they miss me enough to ask me to come back. They did call me on my birthday the day after I moved out, but not to wish me. They wanted to tell me that they'd be back soon and said that I should probably get a plumber to get the tap fixed. I told them that I wasn't living at home anymore and that I'd moved out, thinking that at least that information would get a reaction out of them, but with no such luck. My parents seemed all right with it and Allison didn't care, so that was it. That was the last time I had a proper conversation with my family. Since then, I haven't gone back to see them, and neither have I heard from them. I did hear about Allison sometimes from my friends a couple of times, and that's how I stayed updated on her life, but that's about it. They didn't know anything about my parents, and my parents didn't know anything about me. I've worked hard over the past 2 years, and now I have a place of my own. It's not a mansion, but it's a nice apartment in a good neighborhood. The rent is affordable with my income, which is great because most people my age haven't been able to get here so quickly. I'm happy with how my life has turned out, and I've tried my best to keep my family out of my head. I know that Allison got married a couple of months ago to some businessman almost 10 years older than her and is now living it up in California. I thought all was okay with my family, but 2 days ago, I received a call from my uncle telling me that I had to come to visit my parents quickly because they'd been in a really bad car crash and wanted to see me. I rushed to the hospital as soon as I could because, of course, I'm not that heartless. On reaching, I found out that they'd already been in the hospital for a couple of days and were healing from their injuries. A truck had hit their car, and they'd survived but with serious injuries. They didn't have health insurance because my dad had always believed that if we just took care of ourselves, we wouldn't need the hospital at all, which is by far one of the most idiotic takes I've ever heard. They'd first contacted my sister, but she told them that she wasn't going to come back, and neither was she going to help them. Apparently, it was tacky of our parents to ask for financial help from their rich son-in-law so soon after their wedding, and she didn't want to seem like she was a gold digger to her husband. She didn't want to fly back either because she couldn't just abandon her home and her 2 kids, who weren't even her own. They were her husband's kids from a previous marriage, but she was too busy playing happy family with her husband's family to come see her own parents in the hospital after a terrible car accident. But it's not like she could have helped them with the bills even if she wanted to, because if her husband wasn't there for her, she wouldn't have been able to afford even the flight tickets back home, seeing as how she's just a stay-at-home mom now to kids who aren't even her own. So much for being the favorite daughter, the golden child. I couldn't believe that they hadn't even had the decency to call me first, but it got even more infuriating when my uncle said that my parents now wanted me to cover their medical expenses. It's obviously a huge amount, and it'll take me a long time to recover from a financial loss like that. I don't want to have to spend so much, especially on people who never cared for me or showed me any love my entire life. I know they have other family to take care of them, and even if I don't pay for them, someone else will. It's just that it'll probably be more humiliating for them to take money from others, and they'll definitely have to return it a lot sooner than they would have had to return the money to me. At least that's what they told me while requesting me to cover the bills and even promised that I'd have the money back in no time. So I don't know. I'm in a tough spot right now. I can either humiliate my parents by refusing to pay their medical bills and look out for myself, or I can pay for them, lose out on my own money, and then keep waiting for them to return that amount. If I'm going to be totally honest, I'm not inclined to pay for them at all. We haven't spoken in the last 2 years, and things have been bad between me and my family for as long as I can remember. They're as good as strangers to me now, so I don't feel very compelled to help them out right now. But then that would mean I'm no better than Allison, which would suck. So, I'd rather not want to help my parents pay their hospital bills after they were in a really bad car accident. Update 1. Hey there. I decided not to help my parents. It was a really hard thing to do, but to be honest, I knew their bills would be taken care of, so they had nothing to be worried about. They'd only asked me because they didn't want to ask their other relatives and were being too egoistic. I haven't told them about it yet, though, because how do you even tell your family that you're not going to be helping your parents cover their medical expenses after they've been in such a terrible accident? It's been almost 5 days since I met them, and after reading the comments, I realized that I was still subconsciously competing with Allison. She didn't help our parents, so I felt the need to step up and prove that I was the better daughter or whatever. I guess I won't ever be able to get rid of that competitive streak. No matter how hard I try, it's just who I am now. Most of the comments did say that it was stupid of my parents to not have health insurance, and I agree. It was really stupid of my father to discourage that, and had I been part of their lives, I would have made sure that he got insurance. He didn't even have his car insured because he thought he was that great of a driver. They're lucky that the accident was the truck driver's fault, because otherwise, the cost of the car repairs would also be coming from their own pockets. Coming to their financial situation, which a lot of you had asked about, to come to a conclusion, I'd say that my parents are okay. They're not rich. They're not poor. My dad is the sales head of the company he works in, and my mother works in HR, but at a smaller firm. Their combined income is enough for them, and since they no longer have to support me or Allison, I'd say they have sufficient. Growing up, Allison and I didn't have to worry about money, but of course we couldn't live extravagantly either. We were in the middle, and we still are. But I can't figure out why my parents won't be able to pay for their bills themselves. If they can borrow money but then promise to return the money eventually, then they can surely just pay the bills themselves. They haven't told me the reason why either, and I don't think I'll be able to find out after this either. Update 2. I told my parents that I won't be covering their expenses. They'd been calling me for the past week, and yesterday, I finally realized that I couldn't just ignore them and let this go on until they were out of the hospital. So, I answered their calls and told them that I'd thought about it, and I didn't think I felt the need to help them. As expected, they didn't take it very well and were very angry about it. My mom totally tore into me and yelled at me as loudly as was possible for her, with her broken ribs. She called me ungrateful and stuff, the usual. My dad just told me that I was no longer their daughter and disconnected the call after my mom was done yelling at me. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would because I hadn't been their daughter for a really long time. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I felt loved by my parents, and they hadn't spoken to me on purpose or checked up on me for 2 years, just because I'd moved out after they'd ignored me on an important birthday. So I'd never had parents anyway. I'm just gonna lead my life the way I was for the last 2 years, and probably even before that. This doesn't make that big of a difference to me, like my parents had thought it would. Unfortunately, my uncle did call me after the phone call with my parents to give me another earful, but I hung up after the first couple of seconds because I didn't need this from others, too. They could think whatever they wanted about me. It just didn't matter to me at this point. My uncle then texted me to inform me that they still had another family to arrange the money from, and that since it had come to this now, my parents had decided to use the money from the fund they'd set aside for our wedding. They'd already blown more than half of the wedding fund on Allison's wedding, and whatever little money they had left after that, they'd spent on a Europe trip, which is why now they barely had any savings left, and that's why they couldn't pay for themselves. So that's one mystery solved. Of course, my uncle had told me everything to make me feel bad, but all it made me feel was relief that I hadn't spent my hard-earned money on my parents' bills. They'd spent their own savings irresponsibly, and that wasn't my fault. Their not having insurance because of their own delusional beliefs was also not my fault. Now they could borrow money from their relatives or go to hell, but I wasn't giving them anything. They weren't entitled to anything that of mine anymore, not my time and definitely not my money. Update 3. Hey, so something really weird happened today, and I need to get this off my chest. I haven't been able to tell my friends about anything that's been happening with me because most people I know right now haven't known me for long, and I don't think I want to reveal anything about my history with my family to these people right now. So, Reddit is all I have. Anyway, it's been almost 2 weeks since I last spoke to my parents. A couple of hours back, around the evening, Allison showed up at my place, and I was surprised by her sudden visit. Firstly, because I didn't think she'd know where I was living, but one of our old friends from high school told her the neighborhood I lived in, and she did some asking around to find out where I was, which was a lot of effort for her to undertake to meet me, of all people. She also looks and acts very differently from what I remembered. She's become more refined and sophisticated, I think, and that's been a huge difference because earlier, she used to talk like she was still in high school, but now she sounds more ladylike somehow and even behaves better. Her way of dressing has changed, the jewelry she wears has changed, and even her makeup. It actually felt like I wasn't even talking to Allison today. Everything about her is aged all of a sudden, but one thing that hasn't changed is how she is as a person. I guess you cannot put makeup on your heart and tell people to call it Mrs. Davis, like she did with herself. Her personality and beliefs haven't undergone any renovation for sure. I let her in after she knocked at my door, and I was really surprised to see her, but I was also curious to know why she'd come by, so I decided to talk to her. After some small talk about her life, where she told me everything that she'd been up to unprompted and bragged about how fabulous her life was as a stay-at-home mom of 2 toddlers, married to a wealthy guy without anything to worry about except for her cuticles, I waited for her to get to the point while politely nodding at her boring speech about how wonderfully underrated being a traditional housewife was. She was even advising me to do the same, so I really couldn't wait for her to finish talking about irrelevant things and get to the damn point, which she did after about 15 minutes of talking about her life. She told me that she'd come back here on her own because our parents had apparently been begging her to come see them after the accident. They didn't want her money, but just wanted her to be there for them. And so after 2 weeks, she'd finally come back and figured she'd come to see me too, so we could bury the hatchet. So far, so good. But then she started complaining about how needy our parents were and that they were being disrespectful of her new family. She went on and on about how she had to abandon her 2 babies with their nanny just so she could visit them, and that she hated our parents for making her choose between them and her kids. I'll never be able to make sense of why exactly she keeps referring to them as her kids when they're obviously not hers. She told me a lot about her marriage and her husband, even though I hadn't asked, and from what I'd gathered, the guy she'd married had probably only married her to increase his chance of getting at least partial custody of his kids, which he did, but she thought that he actually loved her or something. He'd been in the custody battle for quite some time now, and since he was a full-time businessman, he didn't have enough time to spare for his kids. His ex-wife was using that against him, but then he announced that he was engaged and was getting married as soon as the divorce came through, and that tilted the scales for him. Allison told me all of this while bragging about how she had saved those kids, but it just sounded to me like her husband had used her. They hadn't even known each other for more than a year when he asked her to marry him, so it was very clear that he was not in love with her. Nobody fell in love that quickly, especially after a divorce, but she seemed blissfully unaware of it, or maybe she knew that he didn't but was willing to look past that because of the huge bank balance and was okay with being a glorified nanny to her husband's kids. In addition to that, she was mad at her own parents for wanting her to be by their side after they'd been in a really bad accident because that was somehow taking away from her time with her new family, which comprised a husband who probably didn't even love her much and 2 kids who were not related to her at all and were doing just as fine with their nanny as they were with her. If the word ungrateful ever had a face, it would be Allison's. I'm no fan of my parents myself, but honestly, when she was talking to me about how they were being too needy, I couldn't even believe that this was the girl they'd rejected me over and over again for. Then she got to the point of her visit and told me that she'd be leaving in 2 days. She'd promised Mom and Dad that she'd stay for at least a month, but she claimed that she was already bored of listening to them talk about the accident and how they'd had the worst experience of their lives for the 10th time and needed to get back home soon. So now, she wanted me to reconcile with them and take her place because she didn't want to feel the guilt of knowing that she'd abandoned her parents when they needed her to be there for them. She didn't know that they'd cut me off yet again because I refused to help them with the bills, probably because they don't talk about me or even think of me, so they didn't bring that up with Allison. She was here because she wanted sympathy for me because she'd had to deal with our parents and had to abandon her family and now wanted to use that sympathy for her own gain and make me step into her shoes and become our parents' emotional support because she didn't feel up to the task. It was just classic Allison manipulation, but I knew it all too well and didn't fall for it. I also had no intention of telling her that while she was at my house, which would inevitably lead to a fight, so I told her that I'd try, but I know I won't. She left after telling me to keep in touch, but we both know she doesn't mean that. I was actually glad to see the back of her because not only was she a terrible and narcissistic person, but she was also really boring to talk to. I could barely get a word in while she droned on about her uninteresting life in California. It basically just revolves around parties, her stepchildren, and her husband. She thinks she's living the life, but I thought it was really sad since clearly her husband doesn't love her. And her kids spent half of their time with their mom anyway, so of course they're going to grow up to prefer their bio mom over Allison, and probably do so even now. From what I heard, it hurts, but it's okay because that's the life she chose for herself, and the life I choose for myself is going to be one that is far, far away from my family because they're really undeserving of even 1/4 of my attention or sympathy. If anything, today taught me that I've been right to distance myself from my parents and my sister because I do not want to be part of these people's lives. They're incredibly selfish and cruel, and I highly doubt they're even capable of thinking of anyone apart from themselves, especially Allison. I'm ashamed that I'm even related to such people, honestly. At least now, I've been able to cut ties with all of them for good, and it isn't likely that they'll be able to get in touch with me anytime soon. I blocked Allison as soon as she left, and I've already had my parents and other relatives blocked for a couple of days now, so I think I'm safe from being troubled by my family for at least the near future. I'll pray that they don't get back in touch with me after this either because I'm way better off without them. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. So I'm an 18-year-old girl, and about a month ago, I decided to start therapy because I've been struggling with some eating issues and other personal stuff. Going into therapy, I had my own set of worries, but I was hopeful that it could really help me out. When I started my sessions, my therapist began doing some things that made me feel pretty uneasy, but I wasn't sure if it was just all part of the therapy process. For one, she talked a lot about how I looked. Almost every session, She'd ask me to stand up and point out parts of my body that I didn't like about myself. Then she'd compare those parts to her own body, which made me feel really uncomfortable and self-conscious. It was strange because I went there to get better, not to feel worse about how I look. Initially, I tried not to make a big deal out of it. After all, my dad was paying for these sessions, and maybe this was just her way of trying to help me see things differently. However, it kept bothering me that we focused so much on my appearance instead of digging deeper into the real problems I was facing. Then something happened that I just couldn't ignore. During a recent session, my therapist asked me to do something that felt way too personal and inappropriate. She wanted me to stand up and actually lift up my shirt. That was the moment I realized this wasn't right. Crossed a line for me. I didn't even ask why she wanted me to do that. Instead, I told her straight up that she was making me uncomfortable, and I left the room right then and there. I stopped at the front desk on my way out to let them know why I was leaving so abruptly. I felt they should be aware that something uncomfortable happened, not just for me, but in case this was a recurring issue with other clients. After leaving, I drove home and ended up having a conversation with my dad about everything. He was pretty upset, but not with the therapist, at me. He thought I should have come to him first with my concerns before quitting the therapy sessions. He said I could have just refused the therapist's request instead of leaving, and that talking to him should have been my first step, especially since he was the one paying for these sessions. Now I'm sitting with all these mixed feelings. I'm relieved I stood up for myself and left, but I'm also second-guessing whether I handled the situation the best way possible. It's all a bit confusing, and I'm trying to sort out whether I should have done things differently or if my response was okay given how weird things got. Was this something I should have done differently? For the top comment, "You are not the idiot, and your father couldn't be more wrong." His comment that you could have just said no shows that he has a fundamental misunderstanding of a patient's vulnerability in a therapy session and the position of authority that a therapist holds. Honestly, you were super brave to take the initiative to walk out when you felt uncomfortable. You were not required to stay and confront her if that didn't feel safe or like something you were capable of doing in that moment. Any good, legitimate therapist would tell you that. Not the idiot. Why would a mental health therapist ever ask you to lift your shirt? That's troubling. I wonder how many other young girls she did this to, and they just accepted it. Nope, you need to file an official report. Not the idiot. You were standing up for yourself. Too many girls get hurt physically, mentally, or emotionally because they're afraid to be rude. I'm proud of you, and your dad should be too. Also, I don't think it's appropriate for the therapist to talk about herself or compare you to her. I'm no expert, but aren't body comparisons a trigger of eating disorders for some people? She sounds awful. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My dad, who has neglected me, isn't really my dad. English is not my language, so I apologize in advance. I am 17, mom is 38, dad is 40. My parents were young when they got married. My mother is a stay-at-home mom and works part-time, while my dad is a software developer. I am the oldest of 4 siblings. I have been treated like the black sheep in the family since I can remember. Birthdays? Never had any, just a cupcake for my mom and no presents. I wasn't allowed to have friends over. Christmas was never something I looked forward to. At most, I would get some socks while I had to look at the presents my dad, aunts, uncles, and grandparents gave my siblings. New bikes, the latest fashion clothes, phones, game consoles, games, you name it, they got it. The same was for their birthdays. Big parties? Their friends and family would show up and shower them with gifts. I was never allowed on family trips and vacations. I was left behind to stay with grandparents who were strict on everything I did, and sometimes they would just call on someone else to pick me up while I was supposed to stay with them. My mom got a part-time job when I was 13, and with that, she would sometimes ask if we could just spend the day together while dad and my siblings were out, even though it was just to get ice cream. When I was at home, I mostly stayed in my room and studied. It didn't matter how well I did in school or sports. My dad showed no interest. I was able to get some money by tutoring. That, along with managing to get a part-time job at the food court and a grocery store, meant I spent less time at home. Over the years, my mental health got worse and worse because of maintaining good grades, doing well at sports, and working 2 part-time jobs. My mom helped me find a therapist who has helped a lot. Yesterday, I came home from work late, tired, and just wanted to go to bed. I opened the door to hear my mom arguing with my dad and aunt about me in the living room. I could hear my aunt saying that I should be more grateful towards my dad. Then they saw me in the doorway and stopped. My mom and dad looked like they had seen a ghost, while my aunt announced, "And in comes the bastard." I was shocked to hear her say that. I know she didn't like me and mostly ignored me when we were in the same room, but I got angry and just asked her to repeat what she had said. My dad quickly stopped her. But no, I wanted to know why I should be grateful about it, so I asked what was going on. No one said anything for a while, so I asked again, "Be grateful about what?" "Being ignored, neglected, abandoned, while my siblings are spoiled and play happy family with dad." As soon as I said dad, my aunt just shouted that I was not his son. I was shocked by what she said and I asked my dad if it was true. He looked at me and just said, "I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. I looked at my mom, and she said nothing. I left to my room and just started crying. Later, my mom found me on the floor shaking and crying. She helped me up and stayed with me until I fell asleep. I woke up this morning and called in sick. I barely left my room today. I just feel like everything I have done to make the man I call dad proud or just to acknowledge me has been a waste of life. I wish that I had known years ago. Update. After I put up this post, I had to get out of the house. I went to be alone for a while, and the thoughts of ending things became too hard to ignore, so I called up my best friend, and he picked me up. We went for a drive, and I told him what had happened yesterday. He just listened while I just cried and told him everything. He knew my father was like this, but not the extended family. I have never seen him so angry before. He had to pull over so he could calm down. I showed him the post, and he was silent for a while. After a few minutes, he told me that no matter what, I was his best friend, and he asked if it would be okay if he could maybe talk to his parents about me staying at his place for some time. I said yes. He dropped me off home, and we got out of the car. We talked for a bit before he left. He gave me a hug and just said whenever I felt alone that I should give him a call. When I entered the house, I ignored everyone. First, I would like to thank everyone for your comments. Though I have not responded, I read through all of them. Not only have they been helpful towards seeing things differently, but to do the best to stay strong until I will move out. You are right, this man is not my dad, and I will no longer see him like that anymore. I will try and get some answers on why I'm being abused, why after all these years no one told me anything, and the most important for me right now, who is my real biological father? Is he alive? Does he know I exist? And to clarify one thing, I have no idea who anyone on my mother's side of the family are, and therefore there is no contact with them. My 18th birthday is in the end of the summer, and I will be moving out that day or even sooner if I have the opportunity to do so. Update 2. So a lot has happened in these few days, and I am conflicted about many things right now, but I am hopeful that I can start to heal mentally. Also, sorry for the long post. On Thursday, before I left for work at the grocery store, my father, whom I will refer to as K, called out to me, and I responded by saying, "Yes, K." He looked confused because I have always called him Dad before. After a bit of silence, I asked, "What?" Quite bluntly, he didn't respond and told me it was nothing, so I went to catch the bus. When I got home late in the evening, my mom wanted to know why I called K by his first name. I told her he never treated me as anything close to a son, so why should I call him Dad anymore? She had no answer and she told me he was hurt by it. I wanted to scream when she said that. Yesterday, I had an appointment with my therapist, and I cannot put it into words how much she has helped me over the years. Later, my best friend called me to let me know that I could stay with them if I wanted. So this morning when I woke up, my mom was already awake and making breakfast. I asked her if we could talk alone today, and it was important. She agreed to talk after breakfast because Kay had to go to work shortly after. After Kay left, she told my siblings to not enter the kitchen for a while. I am paraphrasing a bit because it was a long conversation. We sat down and I found it hard to get the words out at first, but I told my mom that I can't get over the fact that for all these years, how I've been treated and neglected by Kay and his side of the family, and she watched it happen and I need to know why. At first, she tried to dodge the question and gave the same answer as always, but I didn't give in and told her that this was important to me. Again, she tried to dodge it, so I told her that I can't do this anymore, so I was going to pack up some of my stuff and move out. And not until she was ready to tell me the things I needed to hear would we be on speaking terms. She started to tear up and just told me how sorry she was and kept on saying, "I am so sorry," over and over. It hurt me in that moment to see my mom cry, and I tried my hardest to keep my emotions in, and I asked her again why. After some time, when she calmed down, she told me what happened when she was 20 and in university. She had a boyfriend whom she had been with for 3 years. They shared an apartment along with his best friend. They were out clubbing when they had an argument because she wanted to stay, but her boyfriend wanted to go home, and he left. Both she and the best friend were really drunk, and she cheated on her boyfriend with his best friend in the club. The next day, she woke up and realized what she had done. So after a few days, she and his best friend confessed about the affair, and her boyfriend broke up with her. Her ex contacted her parents, and he told them what she had done. Her parents called her furious and told her she was not welcome back home and took away her financial support, so she had to move out. She lost a lot of friends and had nowhere to stay. She had to live in her car for some time. When she realized she was pregnant, she didn't know what to do. She went back to the apartment to find out her ex and his friend were no longer living there. She tried calling and texting them, but they didn't pick up the phone or answer any of her messages. She got a job at a cafe house, and there she met Kay. He was a regular customer, and they got to know each other. Kay asked her out, and even though she told him she was pregnant, he didn't care at the time. Kay's parents were not happy about the idea that their son was dating a pregnant woman and a cheater, and threatened to cut him out of their lives. Kay got scared and was going to break up with my mom, but she begged him not to and promised to be the perfect wife and have his kids. They made plans to get married soon after I was born. Kay never showed any interest in me when I was born, but my mom lived with the hope that one day he would. After hearing all of that, I didn't know what to say for a while. After thinking for a moment, I asked if she had at any point tried to contact my possible biological father. She said no, and the timeline would place her ex-partner to most likely be my biological father, but she can't be 100% sure. I asked her if she ever tried to reconnect with her side of the family. She tried to contact them when she was about to get married, but her parents, siblings, aunts, and uncles didn't want to see her, so she gave up. I asked her why Kay was hurt by me calling him his first name. She told me he has been seeing a therapist for the last 2 years because he has been suffering from depression and guilt. Took me by surprise. She told me that it started when I was 15. I came home after a handball game where we won, and I was awarded man of the match, and I was so happy and excited to tell them about it. She, of course, was happy for me, but Kay just said to put my award with others in my room. I started to cry in front of him and asked, "Why do you hate me?" He didn't reply, and I went into my room and cried all night. After that, he felt sad, like something had stabbed him in the chest, and it didn't go away. It only grew. My mom told him to go see a therapist until he relented, and after some time, the therapist got through to him. For the past few years, he has been living with this guilt, and he has been afraid to confront it. So when I called him by his first name, he realized that he had lost me. The next question I was afraid to ask, but I asked if he ever abused her. She told me he has never abused her. She told me that Kay has only ever loved her. The only time he ever questioned her about anything was when she was pregnant with my younger brother, and he asked for a paternity test, which she understood. When it came back positive, he apologized, and he didn't ask about my other siblings. The last question I asked her, why was I left with people who abused me physically, mentally, and emotionally while they went on trips and vacations? She was shocked to hear about the physical abuse and asked me about it. I told my mom that I never said anything at the time because I was afraid of Kay's family members. When it happened, I told her everything I remember, but here are some of the things they did. My grandparents would scold me loudly and hit me when I was younger. My aunt never spoke to me unless she needed a favor, only to then go back to ignoring me, and told me to stay in the guest room. When I was 14, my father took the family on a 2-day trip to Croatia. He left me with his older brother. He asked me to go to the store to buy some stuff, and of course I said yes. When I came back, he opened the door, took the bags, and locked me out of the house. I sat there crying until they had all finished with their dinner, and then he let me in. She cried the whole time while I told her everything. She told me how sorry she was. She knew they didn't like me, but this was just hate. After the conversation, she asked if I was going to move out and where. I told her I was planning on it, and where I will not tell her because I don't want Kay to know where I would be staying. She started to cry again, and again. It hurt to see her cry. The conversation was long and lasted for several hours, but these are just the main points. After that, I went to my room to clear my head and think. About an hour later, someone knocked at my door, and I told them to open it. It was Kay who opened the door. He asked if he could enter, and I said yes. It was the first time since I can remember he ever entered my bedroom. He looked around for a bit. He looked at the shelf where I keep all of the awards and trophies from school and sports. He was both surprised and sad when he saw the medals from when I did track and field and played football. He stopped when he saw the small man of the match award and picked it up. He held it for a while and started to tear up. He put it back and sat down on the bed. Neither of us said anything for a while. I asked if Mom had told him what we had talked about. He was still tearing up and slightly nodded his head. I asked him if he was aware of how I see him. He nodded again and whispered, "Yes. So you know the extent of what our parents and siblings have put me through." He looked me in the eyes and asked if it was true. I said yes, and he just started full-on crying. After a while, he stood up and hugged me. This was the first time he has ever hugged me and cried in front of me before. I just hugged him back and started to cry. He didn't want to let go, and he said how he was sorry for the pain he put me through, for the years of neglect, for treating me like an outsider, and he begged me not to move out. When he finally let go, he asked to be given a chance. I told him that maybe with time I could forgive him and Mom, but they had to earn it. But I won't forgive his family for the things they had done. Also, for now, he was still Kay. He is hurt by it, but accepted it. For now, I am not moving out, but if things go back to the way it was, I will not hesitate to leave, and he knows it. We are going to see a family therapist together. I will, in the future, try and reach out to my biological father, but I don't know about my maternal family side. I am on the fence with them. I want to thank you for reading. Slight update. I called my friend and told him what happened. The door will always be open at his place. We have known each other since we started school, and we both play for the same team. I know his parents well, and they are lovely people. I know many of you want me to move out as soon as possible, but I told them I would like to give them this one chance, and that is what I will do for the moment. Honestly, I am not scared that things will just go back to how things have been. I have been saving all of my money since I started working. To those who have been sending virtual hugs, here's a virtual hug back. And thank you. Thank you for all the comments and support. Update 3. Firstly, I would like to thank all of you who have messaged on the last post and privately. I would like you to know that I am safe, and I am at my friend's house. They are willing to let me stay with them long term. These messages have not only opened my eyes but also to see my mom and Kay for the people that they truly are. Both of them do not love me and do not care. I have had people telling me their stories of childhood abuse and neglect and how they got out. Every time I have tried to talk to Mom and Kay about the abuse, tried asking my mom how she can happily leave me behind, not done anything about it, they have tried to avoid the questions and love bomb me instead, saying that things will change. What really got me was this morning. I got a message saying, asking how your mom never noticed any bruises when they picked you up after travels and vacations? That sealed the deal for me. There is no way for someone who should supposedly care for you not to notice. This morning, I got ready to leave and packed up my things. It wasn't that much that I was taking with me. When I was ready, I called my friend and asked him to pick me up when he could and call me when he was outside. When my friend called me and I moved my things out, I let my mom know and Kay know that I will be moving out. They did not take it well and started to beg me to stay. I told them that I couldn't stay there because it was clear to me that they didn't care about me. Kay got defensive and tried to say that this was my home and I should not leave. I asked him why. For these past 2 years when he was in therapy, he has remained the same. How come, even though I tried my best, I was still treated like an outsider? He didn't say anything. I asked my mom why she let this go on for years without doing anything to stop it. Again, she didn't say anything. My brothers weren't home, so I went to say goodbye to my sister. It was really hard because she is the only one who has ever treated me with genuine kindness and love. I talked with her a bit, and when I told her that I was going, she looked so sad. It was harder than I thought to say goodbye to her. When I got to his car, I just broke down. We drove around for a bit before we got to his place. His dad helped me get settled in the guest room. My friend told his parents about the posts. They asked me to tell them everything, and I did. They talked in private for a bit and then let me know that they would rather I stay with them long-term than to go back again. Thank you for everything. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My partner and I are parents to a brand new 5-week-old baby who is totally dependent on mom for food because she's breastfeeding. Every night, like clockwork, our little one wakes up about 3 to 4 times. Each time, the baby needs to eat for a good 20 to 40 minutes. This routine has sparked a bit of a debate between us about who should do what during these nightly wake-ups. Here's where I'm coming from. I see that since she's already up to feed the baby, maybe it makes sense for her to change the baby's diapers too. I don't want to just stand by, though. I've suggested splitting the diaper changes with her, offering to do half of them myself. However, she has a different view. She feels that because she's already taking on all the feeding responsibilities, which means she's up nursing during the day and all through the night, I should step up and handle the nighttime diaper changes. Her point is that these moments when I'm changing the baby's diaper are her few chances to take a quick break to use the bathroom, grab a drink, or just catch her breath for a few minutes. There's also something else going on with how we handle these night shifts. She mentions that I can be a bit grouchy during these times. I don't always jump up at the first sound of the baby stirring, and sometimes I even grumble about whether the baby really needs a new diaper at all. On top of all this, our current work situations play a big role in how we're handling things. We are both currently on parental leave, so theoretically, we can both share these responsibilities evenly right now. But there's the upcoming shift in our routine to consider. I will be going back to my job in construction soon, where I really need to make sure I'm getting a solid 8 hours of sleep to be safe and effective at work. She, on the other hand, will still be on leave for about 18 months. Our typical schedule has us going to bed around 9 p.m. I'm up early at 6 a.m. to take care of our dogs, while she usually catches a little extra sleep since she's up later with the baby. This whole situation is about balancing our contributions at night, taking into account the physical demands made on her body by breastfeeding and recognizing the rest I need to function well at my physically demanding job. It's a bit of a puzzle, and we're trying to figure out the best way to handle it so that everyone in our little family gets what they need. So am I the idiot now? For the top comment. Hardcore, you are the idiot. Your wife is exhausted, physically and due to lack of sleep. You have no excuse, especially while you're on parental leave. However, she does need to use the bathroom, drink water, whatever, to take care of herself so she can take care of your son. Parenthood is about shared responsibilities and partnership. You need to grow up and share the burden. There's only room for one baby in your family, and it's not you. Time to be a dad. It's hard, but tough this out. This is your moment to decide what kind of father and ultimately husband you want to be. Stop whining, go pee, be a partner, dad, husband, and help out. This "I'll change half of the diapers" is pure nonsense. Her body just created a baby. Now her body is healing and she is breastfeeding, meaning she's very tired because her body is busy healing and creating food for a baby, and you need your sleep? I'm cracking up. This is just embarrassing, man. I don't understand some people. So when they decide to have a kid, do they think it's a cakewalk? Do they think it's going to be like in the movies where everything is colorful with soft light and smiling babies? Parenthood is hard and is a joint responsibility. You have to sacrifice some sleep time, money, and headspace. But why have a kid if you're not ready? My God, that poor woman. You are the idiot. A classic example of someone who wanted kids but didn't want to do any of the actual work of parenting. Probably assumed she would do all the hard, messy, inconvenient stuff, and he'd just take the kids to their soccer games and help with math homework. Now on to the next story. Story 5. On my 18th birthday, my parents told me they spent 95% of my trust fund on my golden sisters and left me to pay for my college. So I ghosted them, and now, after I became rich, they want back into my life. So here's the deal. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and I happen to be the youngest kid in our family. I've got 2 older sisters who are 33 and 31 now. We all grew up in a family that owns a grocery store. This isn't just any store. It's been in our family for generations, coming from my dad's side. Both my mom, who is 63, and my dad, who is 60, are the bosses of the store. It's a pretty cool family tradition. Now, my grandparents were pretty awesome. They set up college trust funds for each of us. We're talking $100,000 each. That's a lot of money, right? The idea was to help us pay for college so we could get our degrees without worrying about the cost. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to plan for my sisters. Both of them ended up spending all their money way too fast and didn't finish their college education. Now they're both single moms and have to work back at the family grocery store. They have 3 little kids, my nieces, who are super cute but a handful. As for me, I chose a bit of a different path. While I love the family business, I wanted to try something on my own, so I didn't work at the store. Instead, I got a job as a landscaper working during the summers and after school throughout my high school years. It was hard work, but it paid off. I saved up around $20,000 from those jobs. When I got into college on a partial scholarship, I was beyond excited. I mean, this was my chance to make something big of myself. I saw it as an opportunity to finish college without any debt hanging over my head, and I even started dreaming about owning my own place by the time I was 22. That's the dream, right? So, just like my sisters did when they turned 18, I asked my parents if I could take control of my trust fund. I wanted to manage the money myself just like they had the chance to do. It felt like stepping up and taking responsibility for my own future, you know? So my parents said we needed to have a serious talk about the trust fund and planned to discuss it at dinner. When dinner time rolled around, the whole house was buzzing. My nieces were there too, adding to the usual chaos. Once we all settled down, the conversation turned to my trust fund. That's when things got pretty heavy. My parents, looking pretty serious, dropped a bombshell. They asked me if I could wait another 2 years before accessing my trust fund because they had used a big chunk of the money. Turns out they needed it to cover some really urgent stuff. Healthcare and living costs for my nieces and a huge legal bill from a DUI lawsuit that my sister Gloria got tangled up in. Curious and a bit shocked, I asked how much was left of the $100,000. My mom hesitated before telling me there was only about $55,000 left. Yeah, you heard that right. $95,000 was gone, and none of that money had gone to me. My dad then tried to smooth things over. He said they really needed me to think about the family and understand why they had to ask for my help. I couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and disbelief. I thought about how my sisters, Gloria and Lori, had used their trust funds to go to college and even travel around the world. Meanwhile, here I was being asked to foot the bill for their mistakes with my own trust fund. Feeling pretty upset, I told my family that this wasn't just a simple request. They had already made the decision without me. With that, I decided it was time to move out and live on my own. I still went to college thanks to the partial scholarship I had earned. But yeah, that dinner changed a lot of things for me. Over the years, I put the money I had saved up to good use by starting my own landscaping business. It really took off, and now I'm employing 6 guys and we're doing pretty well. Unfortunately, I never got to use any of the money my grandparents originally set aside for me in the trust fund. Despite everything, my parents never managed to replenish it. A couple of years ago, I had my lawyer send a formal request to check the trust fund, and it turned out there was even less money than my parents had mentioned. Only $3,456.13, not the $5,000 they initially told me about. Despite their attempts to mend things, my relationship with my family remained strained over the years. They've tried to reconnect by sending gifts, letters, and invitations, but I've returned every single one. It's been tough to say the least. Now there's a new chapter in my life. I'm getting married next month. My fiancée really wants to meet my family. She believes it's important to try to close this chapter on a positive note. She's encouraging me to forgive and move on, especially since it's been years since I last spoke to them. My fiancé's perspective is making me consider the possibility of reconciliation. She thinks it's essential for us to start our new life together without any lingering bitterness or unresolved issues from the past. This situation is making me think a lot about family, forgiveness, and how to move forward. But am I in the wrong for telling my fiancé, "Sorry, But I cannot move on from this now? For the top comment before the update. Tell your fiancé you love what she's trying to do, but you were robbed $100,000, and they ceased being worthy of the term family when they came back with repayment plus interest. Then the reconciliation can begin. Why didn't you sue the trustees of the estate? You really should have. There's a lot of stigma against calling the law family. Opie's mad, but it doesn't sound like he's interested in suing his parents. This is an extremely common reaction here. Sue your parents. Send your parents to jail. Call the cops on your parents. But most people want their parents to come clean and be accountable for their actions rather than send their 70-year-old mom 2 presents across a blanket with skulls on them. Someone steals $100K from me? No way they get to stay in my life. You are all adults. Obviously, this is just my opinion, but that is more than enough reason to not trust these people in your life. You won't ever get that money back, and the fact that the amount now is gone down instead of up when they promised to eventually pay you back says that they also lied to you. Good on you for moving on without them and doing well. You did enough for them without your consent already. Update. I've been really firm about not forgiving my family, my sisters, and my parents until they pay me back the inheritance they basically used for themselves. This whole mess has been a huge part of my life for a while now. Then, out of the blue, I find out my fiancé has been secretly chatting with them on Facebook Messenger. It doesn't stop there. She actually met them at a restaurant about a month ago. She didn't tell me any of this until recently when she finally shared what happened. She mentioned that their meeting was super emotional. Honestly, I was really upset that she kept all this from me for a whole month. When I confronted her, she said she was scared to tell me soon. She thought I might end things and call off our wedding if I knew she was talking to my family. She even planned to wait until after our wedding to tell me everything. But then just yesterday, my mom called her directly. She was really laying it on thick, begging her to help mend things between me and the rest of them. She talked about how she's missed so much of my life already and doesn't want to miss my wedding too. Now here's the aftermath. My fiancé, who's just dropped this bombshell on me, and is giving me the most heartfelt, tear-jerking apology I've ever heard. She's asking me to forgive her. This whole situation has really thrown me for a loop. I'm trying to process all of this and figure out where we go from here. So here's where things got even more intense. My fiancé, realizing how much she messed up by hiding her talks with my family, brought in her own parents to help smooth things over. Her dad, who's really taken me under his wing, even has a picture of just the 2 of us in his office, which is kind of funny. He's always introducing me as his son and genuinely broke down saying he didn't want to lose me as a son over this. I couldn't stay mad after seeing how much it affected him, so I decided to forgive my fiancé. But just when I thought we could move past this, my sister showed up at my business with my nieces, hoping to clear the air. They admitted they regretted how they handled the trust fund situation and wanted to rebuild our relationship. They knew I was angry, but they missed having me in their lives. My nieces even asked why I wasn't around anymore, wondering if I was mad at them. Then my sisters dropped another bombshell. This whole mess with the trust fund had really torn our parents apart. Turns out my mom had used most of the money without my dad even knowing. When he found out, she tried to get him to cover for her, suggesting they tell me they both decided to use the money. She thought if I believed it was a joint decision, I might forgive them eventually, but if I knew it was all her doing, she feared I'd never forgive her. She was always worried I thought she played favorites with us. Hearing all this, I had to take a step back and think about everything. My relationship with my fiancé, the unexpected truth about my parents, and my sisters wanting to reconnect. It's a lot to process, and I'm just trying to figure out the best way to handle all these revelations and feelings. Honestly, if my mom hadn't tried to cover it up with my dad's help, I would have cut ties completely when my mom drained my trust fund. She pleaded with my dad to pretend it was a joint decision. My dad was livid, but he went along with it to try to keep the peace. Now he's really bitter because this whole mess has wrecked his relationship with me. He even hears from his buddies about how great I get along with my father-in-law. Speaking of my father-in-law, we're pretty close. I even call him Dad, and he calls me his son. My dad shared all of this with my mom and laid it out straight. She needs to fix this mess, or their marriage is over. He's also been upfront with me about what really went down. I had a heart-to-heart with my sisters too. I told them I love them and my nieces, and that I don't hate them, but I had to be honest about how their actions, however indirectly, robbed me of something precious. Our grandparents left us that money to give us each a boost, a final parting gift, and because of what happened, I missed out on the experiences my sisters enjoyed. Felt like they'd stolen that last gift from me. We all ended up crying. I accepted their apologies because I believe they're genuinely sorry, but I also let them know I'm struggling to let go of my resentment. The path to rebuilding our relationship is going to be a long one, and they need to understand that it's going to take time, and I can't just pretend everything's okay overnight. I decided to have a one-on-one meeting with just my dad, specifically requesting that my mom not be involved. When we met up, I could immediately tell he was taken aback by my request. He looked really worn out, almost defeated, before we even really started. He asked if he could speak first. My dad confessed that he's been struggling with depression for the past few years and feels like he's completely failed me. He acknowledged that he betrayed my trust and said that the guilt of that, feeling like he's the reason his own son hates him, is something he'll carry with him forever. Then he mentioned how jealous he was of the relationship I have with my father-in-law. It was too much for him, and he just broke down crying nonstop for several minutes. Once he had a moment to gather himself, I told him I knew it was actually Mom who had decided to use the money. I expressed that I understood why he didn't want to blame her outright, but his decision to cover for her hurt me deeply. Despite everything, I told him I still loved him and made it clear that he didn't owe me anything anymore. I wanted him to know that he wasn't responsible for carrying Mom's mistakes as his own burden any longer. We both ended up breaking down and shared a long, emotional hug that lasted for about 5 minutes. It felt like a moment of real understanding and forgiveness between us. Wanting to take a step towards healing our family, I invited him, along with my sisters and my nieces, to have dinner at my place that night. I made it clear that Mom wouldn't be part of this dinner. It was a chance for us to start rebuilding our bonds, just the rest of us, without the complications my mom's actions had introduced. I made it very clear to my sisters and Dad about the ground rules for the dinner. If they brought my mom along, it would be the last time we spoke. My mom, figuring out that she was being left out of this family reunion, tried to reach out. I turned down her request to talk and laid out my terms bluntly. If you want to talk to me, bring a check for $100,000. With my wedding just a month away, I've invited everyone except my mom. My sisters are pushing for me to listen to my mom's side of the story, especially now that my dad has stopped covering for her decisions. My fiancée, who's just been through her own round of forgiveness with me, is happy and supports my decision completely. Even though I know she'd like me to meet with my mom, she's not pressing the issue. She understands where I stand and doesn't want to push too hard, given everything that's just happened. So should I meet with my mom before or after she hands me the check for $100,000? For the top comment, wow, it kinda seems like your sisters use their kids to manipulate you into feeling guilty for leaving. Yet, in all this time, no one has saved the diner to repay you. Look, I get it, they are wearing you down. Stand firm. They took the money. They can all chip in and pay it back. They are not disabled. They can work. Don't let them apologize without making amends. And they're still on your mom's side. That's why they want you to hear her out. My advice, slow way down. Took them years to break your relationship. Don't rush into mending it. I'd rethink the wedding invite. You went too easy on your sisters. They are all guilty, the same as Mom. They burned through the money. Do you think your mom gave it without them nagging your dad? And nieces are innocent, but your sisters were not 12 when they knew they would rob you of your life. You had to work your butt off because they used stuff left for you, and now they got to bail out. The only good person in this scenario is your dad and nieces. Children are innocent. I would only invite dad and nieces, literally, and skip on sisters and mom if I were you. You do realize that every one of them is manipulating you, right? You see your family are throwing your mother under the bus for something they all had a part in. It wasn't just her idea. While they were throwing away your $100K, still now, because they want to be at your wedding, it's suddenly all her idea, and they wanted no part in it. Suspicious, don't you think? The person you are going to marry guilt trips you and manipulated you into staying. She wasn't thinking about you when she contacted your family. She was thinking only of herself. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My wife sabotaged my date with another girl. Context. My wife and I grew up in a religious cult in which you have to donate money to your girl's father, and he can approve the marriage in exchange. We were friends, and I bought her when I was 19 because her father wanted to accept an offer by another dude she hated. We were able to work and study at university thanks to the facade marriage and always intended to leave the cult after we had stable jobs, which we have now. We have lived together ever since our marriage, but we have different rooms, split the bills, and can date whoever we want. Of course, a couple of months ago, we went to our hometown for a few days to see our families, and she kissed me a lot. We were both single, which we never did, but it would have been weird if I refused too many kisses when we had to act married. After that, we went to the Airbnb room for the night, and we got a bit drunk and she kept making sexual jokes and we ended up having sex. We didn't even talk about it and kept acting married for the rest of the time there and then dropped it when we came back home. It was really weird. Flirting. Then I had a girl flirt with me like 1 month later at a mutual friend's graduation party, and she interrupted and said to a friend of hers, "I want to introduce you to my husband." Also, she's been very moody when I told her I was talking with a girl, and she invited her brother home exactly the day I was supposed to go on the first date, so I had to reschedule another day. And she told me those days she wanted us to go for her aunt's birthday. We never went to her birthday before. Also, she looks happier since when the girl said she doesn't want to date me anymore and is trying to get physical contact way more often, like hugs or tickling me. Physical contact. 2 days ago we were out to buy stuff for the house, and it felt like we were an actual couple and I can tell she felt it too, and there was this weird tension. Then yesterday, she was messing with my hair, and I really wanted to kiss her and can't stop thinking about it since then. I've been talking about divorce for a while, but she's making excuses and saying we'll talk about it later, and we never do. I'm really confused about all of this. I've never been so attracted to someone before, and she's a great person. We always had great chemistry as friends and housemates. There were also moments in the past I thought about her this way, but never this intensely. I'm becoming really attracted to her. I always imposed myself not to do anything about it because it would be like abusing my position of power, as I literally bought her and was still paying back the loan. But then again, now we're independent and we split everything. Is it okay if I wanted to date her? What should I do if I do date her? Should we still get a divorce first or just date and see what happens? Wouldn't it be weird to start dating with someone who is technically my wife? I think I'm going crazy, and I need to make a decision soon. I very much doubt I will be able to not kiss her if she messes with my hair again like that. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My son Holden, my partner's daughter Sophia, and another kid Alan are all part of this story. I'm planning to get married next year, which is super exciting, but figuring out who to invite to the wedding is a bit tricky. Initially, I thought it would just be adults at the wedding, with the only kid being my son Holden. I mean, it's our big day, so I figured our own kids should definitely be there, but maybe not other family kids like nieces and nephews. But here's the twist. Our nieces are a big part of our life because they live really close by. We often look after them when their mom, my sister-in-law, needs someone to watch them. So my partner thought it would be nice to have Sophia and Alan at the wedding too. I guess it makes sense because having kids at weddings is kind of a traditional thing. I thought about it and felt maybe Holden could use some company, and since he's good friends with Sophia, why not have her there? But Alan often gets moody, cries a lot, and can start little arguments with other kids, which then leads to more crying, especially when she's told off. Honestly, dealing with that on a normal day is okay, but on my wedding day, I'd rather not. So I made up my mind and told my partner that it would be better to not have either girl at the wedding if having both meant dealing with tantrums. But Holden really wanted Sophia to come. After some back and forth, my partner and I agreed that only Sophia would come to the wedding, and that's where we landed. Planning a mostly adult wedding, but with Holden and Sophia as the kids who get to be part of our special day. So to make things fair, we're thinking of spending some special time with just Alan on another day. But to be honest, I'm a bit worried about how my sister-in-law might react to the wedding plans. Alan has a history of getting upset really easily, especially around Holden and sophomore. She often ends up starting some kind of argument with them and then ends up crying. I just want the wedding day to go smoothly, And I know Holden and Sophia will behave well. Holden even specifically asked for Sophia to be there. I've suggested to her mom that getting some help might be good, but ultimately, I'm not Alan's mom, so there's only so much I can say or do. I'm just super tired at this point. We've been looking after her for 4 weeks of the 6-week holiday, and it's always been pretty intense since she was about 2 years old. So am I the idiot now? For the top comment. You are the idiot and a solid one. They're sisters, you can't include one and not the other. And how can you explain to them that you'll allow just one? She will forever remember this, and this will forever cause problems in the family. If I were her mother, I'd not allow one without the other. I had never allowed my kid to be singled out, ostracized, and uninvited. Screw your desire to have a playmate for your son at your wedding. You are the idiot. How exactly were you planning on telling your family this? Oh, nothing personal, but only one of your kids can come because I think your other one is just bratty. Did you think that would go over well? Also, it kind of sounds like you play favorites with them. Maybe the other child acts up around you because she knows you like her sister better than her. Also, they're your partner's family, so if they want them at their wedding, they're allowed to have their relatives too. Poor Alan. Imagine being told that you can't go to your uncle's wedding, but your sister's allowed. This could seriously affect her mental health long-term. If I were her mother, my whole family wouldn't come. If you're going to exclude one of us think long and hard about this and all the potential damage this can cause. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.